Redditors who have been home alone and had to investigate a strange noise. What was it and how sure were you that you were doomed? So I don't live alone, but I was alone during this event. I play Xbox quite a bit, usually with the TV sound off so it doesn't come through the mic, but my headphones make it so I don't really hear anything in the apartment. While playing some video games I hear this clicking, assumed it was the game, went on without thinking much of it. But I heard it again while waiting for the next match and no one was talking, so naturally I keep playing cause it was comp. After that match though I went full detective. Checked fire alarms, refrigerator, stove, light switches, lights, garbage disposal, fans, faucets, doors, door hinges and knobs. Nothing. Could not replicate that sound. Being the then 27-year-old scaredy cat that I am, I promptly turned on every single light in the apartment until my roommate came home to save me from potential demons or worse people. She came home and we looked again, checked cabinets. It's time for pots or pans that could have shifted. Still zilch. As we're sitting there just looking around to see what else could possibly make a clicking sound, the glass window in the living room clicks. We live on the second floor. We ran to her bedroom to look outside. No one around. WTF. We sneak back to the living room. Still hear the clicking. She works up the courage to open the blinds and this feckin' bird is pecking at our window. I screamed. She screamed. Burb screamed. Hasn't been back since. +1 for Burb screamed. My landlady's big scary bearded boyfriend, whom I had never met, tearing down a wall in the basement, late at night while I was home alone. I was not impressed. Was home. The only two other people who live with me were at work and out with friends. Heard something similar to knocking on the front door, which is odd because it was 4 AM. I knew it would be no good so I tried to ignore it. Then I heard a noise downstairs. I didn't have any weapons or anything near me other than a dull scissors, so I grabbed a powerful laser pointer that was bright enough to blind people with even a touch on someone's eye. Turned it on. It was bright enough to enlighten every room it shined in, and began clearing room to room. I got a chance to look out a window to the front and saw a van out front of my house. Knew nothing good was happening tonight. Went to a room upstairs and called the cops. As I was on the phone, I saw them leaving. Running away actually, almost like they heard me calling. Cops found them the next day. Don't know much after that, but it's nice to know they were caught. Jesus, I think about this all the time. I never answer the door if I'm not expecting someone, but of course if someone knocks just to see if anyone's home to answer the door, they are going to break in when I don't answer. Thought it was the cat knocking something. Then the cat meowed from right behind me. Turns out it was a cat, just not mine. Neighbor's cat got in the kitchen. That happened to me as a kid. I heard my cat come into my room one night and I could see its shadowy shape beside my bed, so I reached down and grabbed it to give it a cuddle. Well, it did not appreciate that and started clawing and ripping at my hand. I jumped out of bed and turned on my light. It was a feral cat that had followed one of my cats, though the cat flap. Happened 2 nights ago. Was up at 2 AM playing games to take my mind off things. I hear a sound like a knife or axe being sharpened off a whetstone. Thought it was coming from the game at first, but nope. From the backyard. I tiptoe out there with a flashlight and I can still hear the noise. It's coming from my neighbor's backyard. I walk over to the wall and peer over with the flashlight and the sound stops and I hear a door click shut. So if I get axe murdered in the next week, you know what happened. Update. For any dudes that care. Heard a similar sound at about 1 AM tonight, half an hour ago as of writing this. Decided to take the advice of all the lovely people telling me I was a freaking idiot for going unarmed. So this time I took my little .22 target pistol and jammed it in my coat pocket on the very slim chance my neighbor was a drug crazed axe murderer getting ready to turn me into his newest victim. Went out with no light this time and peered over the wall into the darkness. My neighbor, a middle-aged dude who I've spoken all of 2 words to, is just sitting there with a little light, sharpening different tools. Yes, one of them was an axe, on this flat circular whetstone. I decided maybe I shouldn't be judging this poor dude considering I was standing in the pitch black of night with a handgun staring at him from over the wall. Went back inside. Haven't been axe murdered yet, so I think I'll be alright. Okay, this is a really weird one. When I was in middle school I came home at dusk to all the lights off and the oven timer going off. I called out to my mom to make sure it was okay to turn off, but I got no answer. My mom is a stay-at-home mom and my dad was a pilot, so he was always away. She was usually home whenever I get home, especially in the evenings. I used to be really afraid of the dark, and so coming home to a dark house already set me on edge. I went into my parents' bedroom to look for her and walked into the bathroom. I went into the area where the toilet was, as it was a separate room. In the toilet area was a pair of her shoes with her pants still and them propped up right on the shoes as if she was still sitting there. My mom is a neat freak, and so it was unusual to see her leave any clothes around. I must have thought she vanished or something while on the toilet, and I freaked out and ran to my friend's house in the neighborhood. She really was at a neighbor's house and had left her pants like that before getting in the shower, and I was dumb and had a big imagination. I came home from class and I heard a huge freaking bee in my roommate bedroom. I knew she was still at school. I rolled up a newspaper, got a glass so I could trap it, and entered her bedroom. I looked around, inched forward, and found her dildo in a box that had started out of nowhere, lol. I wasn't home alone, but one night when I was student I was woken up by my phone buzzing. It was my disabled roommate calling me from her room. She could hear someone breaking in downstairs. I listened, and there was definitely noises downstairs. I hung up on her and called the police. As I'm on the phone, she scoots along the floor into my room. The police come, and it turns out it's a drunk girl from down the street who thought this was her house and decided to break the window since her key didn't work. It all got sorted out and we were very happy it wasn't anyone dangerous. Then a few days later, I come home to find my housemate on the phone to her mother telling the story and painting me like a wimp and Lawton-esque. Man, that he is. Calls the police. Girl, you rang me in the middle of the night to tell me we were being burgled. You thought I would go down and sort it myself. You did the right thing, and that girl is a moron. Hopefully as she ages and matures she grows up mentally as well. So one day, I'm in my den watching TV and all of a sudden all the power to the lower level of the house shuts off and I hear a loud thud, thud, thud noise coming down the stairs. It's pitch black and I jump up and slowly walk towards the stairs listening for more noises. I don't hear anything, but on my way up the stairs I notice the light switch which controls all the lights is turned off. I'm now convinced that someone is in my home as light switches don't turn themselves off. I throw open the basement door and head to my front door and find it still locked. Went to the back door and it was still locked. Headed back to the lower level and flipped the lights on, and at the bottom of the steps I see the perpetrator. The smoke detector on the wall was held in place by those sticky tape things. They gave up and the smoke detector fell and hit the light switch and then bounced down the stairs. The smoke detector on the wall was held in place by those sticky tape things. They gave up and the smoke detector fell and hit the light switch and then bounced down the stairs. Or that's what the ghosts want you to think. First time I wasn't alone as husband was asleep upstairs. It was 3 months ago and I was up late after a midnight finish at work. I had kicked off my jeans and wrapped the blanket round me. Decided I was bored of the TV so I muted it. It was still on. And got my Kindle out to read. The cat was curled up on my feet when I heard noises of the tarp covering the garden furniture being rustled outside the back door of kitchen. Didn't think too much of it as it was a really windy night. Anyhow, a few moments later I had a scraping and popping noise which sounded like it was coming from in the kitchen. The cat jumped up running and growling at the back door. I got up and stepped into view of the doorway between kitchen and living room, which had been open. You couldn't see me from the kitchen but could clearly see someone was up and in the next room with the TV on. There was a man at my back door with something metal in his hand and then I just started screaming. He ran off. Husband ran down. Anyway, about a month later he got in again, this time while I was in myself. It was during the day and I was about to leave for work. Opened the back door to let some air in the kitchen. Walked upstairs for a minute and heard someone walking in living room. Thought husband had come home early and shouted from the top of the stairs that you babe, only to realize when whoever it was I heard I'm still jumpy. Dude, WTF, that's terrifying. I was 15, babysitting 3 little kids in a cottage in the middle of nowhere in the west of Ireland. Parents went to dinner, kids asleep. It's remote so there's zero noise. Then I hear a bang at the front door and scraping against the glass. It was the most terrifying noise ever. I almost crapped myself. Turned off the lights, ran to the kids' room, peeked out the window and could see nothing. Just the constant scraping at the glass by the front door. I stayed there until the parents came home. When they walked in they were like, "Hi, how's it going kids, okay?" I'm totally freaked out. There's been some weird scraping at the front door. I can't see anything out there. Did you? Oh, there's a bucket of lobster one of the local fishermen must have left. How nice. I nearly freaking died. Like WTF. Lobster scraping the window with their claws. I had no problem eating those things the next day. Once, I was in my basement during one heck of a storm when I heard a tapping on the window. Looked up and saw crayfish tapping his claw on the window. I had just gotten home and it was totally dark. I knew my parents and siblings weren't home. As soon as I went up the stairs I heard an extremely loud smash. It sounded like glass. I ran to my room and grabbed my 6-inch dive knife as well as another folding knife. I went downstairs and screamed, "I'll fricking kill you," even though I was scared shitless. In the end, it turned out to be a wine glass that fell off the shelf that was located under the stairs. The vibrations from my running caused it to fall off and shatter, lol. Heard two people having a whispered conversation, and I was sure it was either two criminals or two evil spirits discussing what sort of awful thing they were going to do to me. I definitely heard the words "the girl." It was a tap running. Home Alone. Burglar alarm goes off at dawn. The sound drowns out anything else. I got out my gun and called 911. I was shaking so much, I ended up putting the gun back in the safe so I didn't shoot myself. Cops came, looked around the perimeter. No evidence of a break-in. No harm, no foul. Next day, alarm goes off at dawn. Turns out, the heat of the sun caused the alarm to go off. It hadn't happened before due to the season and angle of the sun. Moved to a place where leaving the front door unlocked all the time is commonplace and we don't need an alarm. Back in the early 90s when I was 10 or so, we had just moved into a new house. We had noticed our doorbell would ring and when we answered it, no one was there. We brushed it off as some kids playing ding dong ditch on the new family in town. A few weeks and my parents had gone out for a date night and left my brother and I home alone. Brother was older and responsible, for the most part. The doorbell rang when we were supposed to be in bed. Thinking it was our parents, we ran and hid in our beds to act asleep. The doorbell rang again, and once more shortly after. My brother, thinking my parents forgot a key and were trying to get our attention, decided to answer it. As we were going to the door, the doorbell started ringing again and again, over and over again, vigorously, now like someone was mashing the doorbell very fast. My brother opened the door and to our horror no one was standing there, but our doorbell kept ringing over and over again. Scared shitless we slammed the door and ran back to bed to hide. Few weeks later we noticed someone arrived at our neighbor's house, walked up to their door and our doorbell rang. Apparently the previous owners owned our house and the house next door and rigged the doorbell so when the door rang next door ours would too. I guess to let the previous owner know someone was next door if he wasn't there. But for the first couple months we thought it was pesky kids, but then we just started calling our random doorbell rings Casper before we got the lines fixed. Our house is near a home for assisted living, mostly for Down syndrome. Sometimes the night staff are either understaffed or just lazy, so they didn't see one get out. They made it into our lawn and started crying and moaning at 1 AM. I am scared shitless and don't have the guts to check it out. That makes me sad. Someone lost and wandering scared at 1 AM. Back when I was living with my parents, they went on a week-long trip, and one night I just hear this rustling in the garage. Our kitchen had this inconspicuous door that went right into the garage, but you couldn't see it unless you knew exactly where to look. So I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, then snuck in the garage. Turns out, Dad had left the window open and the neighbor's cat got in and was unable to get out. So many neighbor cat stories in this thread. My sister and I were home alone in high school. I was probably 15 and she was 17. Besides my excellent ability to crap talk, we were fairly defenseless BC of our smallness. Anyway, we're sitting around watching TV and suddenly hear something as if it collapsed onto our ceiling. Imagine a tree or large animal coming down above you. That sound was followed by continuous pounding and horrifying, dragging and clawing sounds. Eventually, the pounding stopped, but the clawing worsened. It sounded like large creatures, harpies or giant eagles, were using their talons to rip through our ceiling. My overactive teenage imagination was going wild. Even the pizza man who brought our food looked concerned, but he said he hadn't seen anything on our roof. Fast forward a few days, and the maintenance department announced that our tiny building had attics and that a few raccoons had somehow gotten in and were running around. I was befuddled. BC, those noises sounded more PPL sized, but okay. Well, they didn't say the size of the raccoons. I have a big laser multifunction printer at home that sits in our office that's down the hall from our bedroom. Something happened to it and it kept resetting for some odd reason at weird times. Now most of these resets we were either not home or had the TV on or something, so you couldn't hear the faint chiming sound it would make. The chime it makes is musical and short, but if you hear it in the dark out of the blue it's creepy as frick cause it's like a kid's toy or someone's cell phone. So now that the stage is set, one night after we showered and everything, we get in bed, turn the lights out, and literally like 10 or so minutes after we hear the chime, both of us freak the frick out. We had no idea where the chime came from. No one else is home. We have no kids and both our cell phones are next to us. So we spent 30 or so minutes really paranoid walking around the upstairs, downstairs, basement, garage etc trying to see if someone is in the house, and we just didn't notice but nothing. Reluctantly we fell asleep and then it happened again. This happened probably a dozen or so times over the course of 2 months. It wasn't like it happened at 9:30 PM every day. It was completely random times, generally after we got in bed and turned the lights out. Then finally one day I'm working from home and sitting there next to the printer and it does it again. I totally facepalmed all the time we spent trying to find WTF was causing the chime. My printer does exactly this. It will randomly go into cleaning mode and sounds like a mixture of a 737 taking off and a hammer in a blender. The house I live in has a notorious past. No details, or you'd figure out my exact address with a quick Google search. But before I found out about its history I had a series of sleep paralysis about once every 3 weeks or so. I am startled awake by what I tell myself is sleep paralysis, where there is simultaneous loud scratching and banging on the door panels to our attic's crawl space. Our master bedroom happens to be in the attic, and both of the crawl space access points are fully sealed from the inside and out. One is blocked by my dresser, and the other is in my fiance's closet, and nailed shut, so I've never attempted to investigate. We also have a basement apartment that we Airbnb, and over a 2-day span of cleaning it between a long-term tenant and an Airbnb one, I found 4 human adult teeth, 2 in the den, 2 on the welcome mat the next day, one after the other. Even though I should have seen the second one at the same time I found the first one. I asked the tenant who'd moved out if they had any possible explanation, but they only offered a few dismissive options. No Airbnb guest has reported weird crap, so I just presume whatever brought the teeth is gone now. I'd bring those teeth to the police. It's possible they could identify whether or not they are human teeth, and if so whose teeth they are. If there's an active investigation into a disappearance murder, it might help them. On my own house years ago, crap started to shake in my cabinet for no reason. It happened in the daytime and for a few minutes I thought ghost is really haunting my place at that moment. A few minutes later I found out it was minor earthquake, which nearly never happens in Poland. When I was 16, I was homesick from school one day. For some reason, I was singing quite loudly to myself in the bathroom when I heard an obvious noise coming from my bedroom. My main concern was that whoever it was would have heard my terrible singing, so I went to my room to investigate. Turns out my dad had come home early from work without keys and, assuming no one was home, broken through my bedroom window. It was not until after this point that I realized it could have ended quite differently. 2 instances. About a month ago I was home alone with my 2 little dogs while my family was on vacation. My room's in the basement so I can hear all the movement in the house. I woke up to a cabinet being slammed shut in the kitchen. I thought maybe one of my dogs somehow opened and closed a cabinet until I realized they were in the room with me. I perched up to listen for footsteps and all the cabinets starting aggressively opening and closing. It was scary as crap. I grabbed a bat and walked towards the kitchen, but then the noise stopped. Nothing was in my kitchen. I'm still confused and scared as heck about it, but all my favorite snacks are in the kitchen and the haunting of those cabinets doesn't stop me from eating Oreos at 1 AM. A different instance. When I was 15 and home alone on Thanksgiving at about 6 PM, I heard my front door slam open and footsteps running in my house, but I knew no one was supposed to be coming home, so I locked my bedroom and accepted that my entire house was going to be robbed as long as they didn't bother me in my room. Then there was banging on my bedroom door. I sat quietly until I heard them call my name. It was some friends that lived nearby coming to kidnap me to enjoy Thanksgiving with them. It was a nice gesture but terrifying execution. Not completely alone, but 13-year me and my best mate, only two in the house. Around 11 PM, heard my front security door close. I pick up the carving knife, because I'm some badass teenager totally capable of defending myself and investigate. Open the door, nothing outside, not a hint of anything. Oh, and the screen door was locked, so what did we even hear? Anyway, walking back to the kitchen to out the knife away, my mate decides walk through the lounge room and scare the absolute crap out of me by jumping through the other entrance of the kitchen. I felt the knife leave my hand for a split second before grabbing it again, and that's how I nearly threw a knife at my friend. TL. Doctor. Investigated that noise. Nearly killed a guy. I live in a small loft. I was on the upper floor waiting for my dinner to get ready, casually browsing Reddit. It was cold and dark outside. I hear a thud coming from my balcony. It sounded like someone landed right in front of my window. I go downstairs and for no freaking reason I check the oven, giving my back to the apparent noise source, just in case I really wanted any potential axe murderer to have an edge on me. It was a potato. A potato had exploded in my oven. Its walls now painted in some of my dinner. Only peels, like a broken husk, remained. I have since tried to reproduce the effect, but to no avail. I am left with thinking some potatoes may be sentient and may choose their own way out of this world. TL. DR. Religious extremist potato. It's the TL. DR. that raises this to the next level. Had a raccoon break into my house in the middle of the night. He managed to get into the pots and pans cupboard and got stuck in there when the door closed up on him. He made one heck of a terrible racket. I honestly thought someone broke in, so I grabbed my gun and jumped up out of bed butt naked and proceeded to do a room by room clear. I didn't hear anything else, so I honestly began to question my sanity and wondered if neighbors had a fight or I had a dream that just scared me awake. Just as I was getting ready to try and go back to sleep, he caused another racket in the kitchen cupboard. That's when I went to investigate and opened the cupboard, and there was an aggressive trash panda. Closed the cupboard and zip tied it shut. Called the local authorities and they said there wasn't anything they could do. I then asked if they wanted to investigate gunshots in the vicinity, because if they didn't bring their country asses to my home and get this thing, that I am going to empty both magazines into it. I'm from Chicago but living in Kentucky. Dealing with things like raccoon is not something I was trained for. Holy crap. Dude, I imagined you butt naked with your dong flopping around going from room to room, not knowing if you're gonna die or what. Dying naked would have sucked. Glad it was just a trash panda. I'm a plus 50-year-old widow, laying in bed about 11:30 one night, Reading, and I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry open my kitchen door at the back of the house. I grab my firearm and start creeping through the house. I get in the kitchen and try to gently pull aside the blinds over the window above the sink to see the back porch. Nothing there and the sound has stopped. So I think I'm crazy. Start to walk out and hear it again. A really sharp sound. So I ooze over to the back door and peek out that window. Nothing. But the sound keeps happening like it's just on the other side of the wall. I sneak into the bathroom and peek out that window. It's an opossum. He's using his claws trying to lift up the heavy but unsecured door into my cellar. It flashed across my mind to shoot him out of spite for scaring me silly, but of course I didn't. I did call him foul names and curse his lineage, though. Perfectly reasonable. When I first bought my home, I lived with only my 2 cats. We had been there about 3 months or so when, late at night, curled up in bed with my boys either at the corner of the bed or against my thigh. My older cat suddenly sat up and growled, like a full-out deep bass growl, staring at the bedroom door completely stock still. I think my heart completely freaking stopped as now I assumed there was a murderer in my home. Even worse, the only other time I ever heard him make that noise before was just before USPS knocked on my front door downstairs. My cat did that, but it turns out we just had mice in the walls. It was new to her too, it did her a frighten. Middle of the night I hear crashing around my house and grunting. It seems to be all over my yard. The gravel of my walkways would crunch, bang against a wall, grunts. Then I hear a rattling of my back door, shaking. I grab my phone and go to look out the blinds of an adjacent window to see what I could see. It's when I started to dial emergency that I saw the perp. It was a rather large dumb golden retriever who had gotten himself trapped in my backyard. He was playing with one of my kids' toys. Freaking 2 in the morning. All he needed was for me to open my gate, give him a scratch, and he was on his way. My yard is lower than the adjacent yard and he'd gotten over a small fence from their side and couldn't get back over on mine. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.